Welcome back to the Marvel Movie Minute, a daily podcast in which we explore the films of the Marvel Cinematic Universe 1 minute at a time. In this, our 5th season, we are looking at Joe Johnston's 2011 film, Captain America, The First Avenger. I'm Andy Nelson from the Next Reel Film Podcast. It turns out Pete's actually now being interrogated. Fingers crossed that we'll get him back by next week. Today we are talking about minute 87, which begins with blood on the floor and ends with a cut of steak. Back on the show, it's Lorraine Dahm. Hello, Lorraine.
Hello, everyone.
The interrogation room. There's a funny little trope here that I kind of love when it's employed well. It's this moment where Zola, right at the very beginning of this minute, he notices some blood, like dried blood on the floor. And there's this trope where a character notices something in a film, and just as they start trying to move in for a closer look or trying to figure out what it is or whatever the case may be, they're interrupted usually by a loud sound followed by someone entering the room or something like that. I kind of always love the way that plays in films. You know, you as an audience, you want to look too, and then we're all interrupted. And I think it works well here because it highlights the fact that there's blood on the floor and Zola might start being a little concerned, and he's like leaning in for a closer look like, oh, crap, is something they're going to do to me? And then all of a sudden the door opens up. I love it.
Yes. And it's such a unnecessarily noisy, clangy door
exactly.
too. Like, I mean, it sounds, when it slams shut, it sounds like it's like 500 pounds of pure steel or something.
Right. Yeah. No, that is very true. This for it's headquarters for a military operation. Presumably, they do have some space in here for, having prisoners of war that they can interrogate and stuff like that. But still, it sounds like a much heavier door than it likely is. Like, it literally sounds like a door in a prison, like a giant metal door hitting a giant metal frame.
Yes. I know, it's doubly funny. Just because anything that's louder than it's supposed to be is funny. And then just because Zola is such a little wormy guy that, the fact that they would have this big, huge, thick security door for him.
Right. I know. It's very funny. But yeah, so here Tommy Lee Jones enters as Colonel Phillips, and now we've got a room full of Joneses. As we've got Tommy and Toby Jones, no relation, sitting to talk across from each other. This is a fun little scene. I like the way that this plays. Colonel Phillips walks in with a I don't know, it looks like one of those cafeteria trays. And he's got on it a plate with steak, potatoes, and broccoli. There's some salt and pepper. There's some milk and a fork and knife. And I love the way that all of this looks. He asks, or I guess he kind of tells Zola to sit down and then joins him. And they have this little exchange, this little interrogation. I can't help but notice also in this dark room that there is a very intense single light that conveniently is right over the seat where Zola and presumably anyone else they're interrogating sits. So it ends up becoming the perfect design for an interrogation scene. What do you think of this scene? Do you like the way it plays?
Yes, that's the first thing that had struck me ever in this scene was how it was lit like an interrogation. Like, you are guided into that train of thought. I mean, even if you hadn't seen it coming, I guess would be the way. It's very stark. It's very set up kind of like Law and Order, like all the TV shows that do the interrogations. And just, again, like the stark lighting compared to the bright colors and sort of flashiness we've been seeing. And then coupled with like the 40s size serving sizes, like the little teeny glass of milk and, the tiny amount of potatoes. And the fact that Tommy Lee Jones just starts like, if you don't want it, I'm eating it. I'm not letting this good food go. Like, that kind of showed more about how the war was going than anything else.
Yeah, I mean, he very specifically calls that out about how difficult it is to get a hold of a prime cut like that, which I think is funny that he brings that up. I also think that it's kind of funny though that like he's like, all right, well, if you're not going to eat it, I'm going to eat it, and he starts eating it. But he's like, just cutting into it.
He's literally chewing the scenery.
Yeah, right. What's funny though is like if they were going to poison him, because the way that it plays is like Zola is very suspicious. Like he's,
Mhm.
he feels they're likely using this as a way to drug him in some capacity. I mean, he's likely done that before, and so here he is being very suspicious about what's in it and all of that. With Colonel Phillips' brilliant retort, "Cow," makes me laugh every time coming out of Tommy Lee Jones's mouth. But it's funny because like he could be eating the steak, but the milk could be poisoned, the salt or the pepper could be poisoned, any of the vegetables could be poisoned. Like it's not necessarily the steak. And so I think that it's funny that it plays this way because like he might eat the steak and then Zola might go, I think I'll have the broccoli actually, and then be knocked out. So it's
Right.
it's funny the potential that they could have had to actually do something here. I like the way that plays out.
Yeah. Oh, and it's sort of like Zola kind of having to choose, like, do I want a meal or do I want to risk being poisoned? And kind of when you see Tommy Jones eating it, you're sort of like, well, did he just miss out on a perfectly safe meal then just to be stubborn or suspicious? Or
Yeah, right.
He's already outsmarted.
Or is he really a vegetarian? I was wondering, like, maybe he is a vegetarian. I mean, he says meat disagrees with him, but he doesn't go for the broccoli or the potatoes.
Well, I think wasn't Hitler a vegetarian? So I thought maybe they were playing on that, where like
I'm not sure. Was he?
Yeah, maybe.
I'm Googling it right now. No, his prime diet did include meat. He was fond of Bavarian sausages. So there you go.
Okay.
But what was interesting is that did send me down this kind of look into the history of vegetarianism. Like, vegetarianism has been a thing all the way back since 9th century BCE. And there has been a lot of kind of stories about different types of vegetarianism through the ages in different parts of the world. India, the Hellenese, the Egyptians. There were some vegetarianism practiced there, and in Greece, and in Japan, and it disappeared for a long time in Europe. And then it looks like it started coming back again in the 19th and 20th centuries. There actually was, in 1847, an organization in the UK formed that was called the Vegetarian Society, which I think was interesting. And it really kind of became more and more popular, largely in the 20th century. So I think, I don't think it's beyond a possibility that maybe Zola is, in fact, a vegetarian. It's interesting that it's not ever really called out, and the scene plays it like, he's just suspicious. But, there is a possibility that maybe he actually is a vegetarian.
I think in Europe, meat was considered such a luxury item that people were struggling to get more of it into their diet. Whereas in other countries with preservation techniques or the climate, you couldn't preserve meat as well. And so it was a less savory item sometimes. And so, but I don't know how that would play into Zola's decision, other than maybe, he tortured enough people and that sort of turned him off of it.
Yeah.
Always a pleasant thought.
Oh, yeah. Right. How do you buy into Zola as portrayed in the film? Like, he starts off kind of being this mad scientist a little bit, very excited about what he's going to be able to do with the Tesseract energy. But over the course of the film, like, we've seen him reacting in ways to Schmidt's decisions and Schmidt's actions that it does seem like he's starting to get a little bit nervous about things. But do you think that they were playing it like this is a person who doesn't want to die and he actually wants to join the Allies? Or do you think that they've played it like he's just a suspicious character, or he's nervous that Schmidt doesn't like him anymore? Like, how do you feel that it's played, like, as they've portrayed him in the film?
In the film, I took him as Zola looks out for Zola. I think he has his own goals that might not necessarily be explained in the film. I think he saw the awesome power of the Tesseract and was like, thinking beyond maybe what Schmidt or anybody else would with that. And I don't think he necessarily cares for power, but I think he cares for having the power to do what he wants as far as his experiments and things like that. And I don't think he necessarily is planning on switching to the Allies. I think he's going to do what keeps him alive for the next couple weeks until he has another choice to make.
Yeah, I suppose that's an interesting way to kind of look at it, because I part of me kind of struggles with some of that I'm like, I can see that, but at the same time, I'm like, the way that his character seems when we next see him in The Winter Soldier, like suddenly he seems like full on Hail Hydra, I'm a maniacal genius again. And here, like, I don't know, it's so interesting because he seems so reticent a number of times to, like, he doesn't want to do the salute to Schmidt, the Hail Hydra thing. And like, I find him to be an interesting character. And I don't know if I ever fully can jump on board with the full. I guess I don't mind the portrayal so much here, but I just feel like once we get to the next film, I start like, wait a minute. I thought he was not super happy over there with Hydra, but maybe it was just Schmidt.
I think he doesn't really care about, like, how when he says, like Schmidt wants to take over the world or the world isn't enough. Like, I think he doesn't want the administrative duties of that. Like, I don't think he really cares. He just wants kind of unfettered access to do whatever weird little experiments he wants to. And he probably knows that most of his experiments are probably not regarded by most people as ethical or what have you. And so, I mean, he needs a sort of powers that be that won't care about what he's doing, but I don't think he really cares about what those powers are.
Well, and I suppose to a certain extent, there's a sense that we got, like the last time we saw him and Schmidt together was in the factory ruins in Greece, when Schmidt is yelling at him for, the fact that the Allies keep destroying his factories, and he tells Zola to his face, "You are failing." And Zola is just like, "That's not my job. I just designed the weapons." And so I wonder if part of it is just that, yeah, Schmidt is a bad leader. He is putting stuff on on Zola's shoulders that Zola, they don't fall in his wheelhouse, but he's kind of making him do it. And I wonder if that's the thing, more that he loves to do all of this crazy stuff, but Schmidt's using him as the wrong type of tool.
He's definitely a round peg getting shoved into the square hole, and knows it. Yeah. And realizes that that's not the way to victory. And I mean, he could also be self-preserving enough to know which way the tides of history are starting to flow. If the Allies, despite Schmidt being the Red Skull, are still winning at this point. So I think I think he doesn't care who wins as long as he's not in prison or dead.
Well, okay, so this is an interesting question. I know, this interrogation, we're just very early on in it, just kind of up to the point where Phillips takes the steak and starts eating it, and we're really the bulk of the interrogation is really in tomorrow's minute. But at this point, we find out about the cyanide. This is where Phillips says every Hydra agent has basically chewed up their cyanide, and we can't stop them, but not you. And this is kind of where we are with things. The interesting thing is, and this certainly might be something we want to talk about a little bit more in tomorrow's minute, but we have this sense of Zola that, we're getting this sense. I mean, he's in this interrogation room. Phillips is talking to him, and he hasn't bit down on this pill. But he also knows what Schmidt is capable of. Like, he, has seen the weapons. He's designed and built these weapons and knows, like, the Valkyrie is out there. Schmidt has this intention to basically take over the world. And it does make me wonder, like, he's here with the Allies. The Allies are going to hopefully help him so that he can kind of help them and they can all kind of work together. But still, if he thinks that Schmidt actually could win and take over the world and destroy everybody else. Like it seems like suddenly he's in a position where, he probably is better off just figuring out a different plan.
Yeah. I mean, we know from later movies that he remains loyal to Hydra. So is it just he's no longer loyal to Schmidt? Or is it that Hydra's kind of main bullet point ideas for the world change in the 50 years between the movies? Yeah, it's like you said, he became like super Hail Hydra in The Winter Soldier, and he wasn't really all that in this movie. So you kind of got to wonder what he's either hiding here or what changed in 50 years.
Yeah, I think there are going to be some interesting things happening within Hydra after Schmidt is gone from it. It seems like because of him, because he was brought here, and really, through this interrogation and really what ends up resulting because of it, and this whole Operation Paperclip, and, this whole alliance, it seems like, I don't know, I guess I wonder, is he the one who really rebuilds Hydra inside S.H.I.E.L.D. and makes it what he wanted it to be all along, because now Schmidt's not here? Because it's very unclear, like, if there is more leadership at Hydra other than Schmidt. Like, we don't really get a sense of, like, any position other than it certainly seems like Schmidt is the head,
Mm-hmm.
right? It seems like he's the main man here. But it does make me wonder if when Zola joins up here, once he finds out that Schmidt disappears, if he says, this is my chance to kind of turn it into what I always wanted it to be.
Right. I mean, along with Schmidt disappearing, if we kind of merge our timeline with this movie, I mean, the Nazis disappear too. And I want to tread very carefully on this point, but maybe he disagreed with a lot of Nazi ideology, but not necessarily their end goal or tactics. And so once the Nazis and Schmidt were done, he could develop things. I mean, Hydra's whole thing was getting rid of bad people before they even commit the crime. And I mean, other than their nebulous version of bad or troublesome, it wasn't the same like racial markings that the Nazis had used. And so maybe that's where Zola's hangup was not like, it's not just one group, like bad people are in every group, and that's how we need to weed them out versus genocide. So, like I said, this is an icky subject, but...
Well, yeah, it's tricky because this is, of all the stories, the one that is most tied into real world history, and,
Yes.
obviously a difficult time that, where far too many people, were killed for terrible reasons. So, yeah.
Yes. And that's kind of what I think maybe that's what Zola saw was the problem, was the focused hate versus hate for worldwide, I guess.
Yeah. Well, it's certainly interesting. He's an interesting character. And this is, I feel like there's, from here through the end of, Schmidt's time on the planet, I feel like, it's probably a very uncomfortable time for Zola, because he's just unsure what's going to happen to him. Because my expectations would be that he would know if Schmidt takes over, or if he wins and takes over the world, he's toast. Like, there's no way Zola is going to be left to live.
Right. Only Schmidt would have the weapons, and the way to keep that is to get rid of the person who built them.
Yeah, right. All right. Well, we're going to continue the bulk of the interrogation tomorrow. So, any last things here that you wanted to talk about the way that this scene plays out?
One thing Marvel is very good at, I think, is giving agency to characters other than the main characters, your hero and your big bad guy. I mean, here, an important turning point in the whole situation, and it's between Zola and Colonel Chester, or Phillips, excuse me. I mean, a very strong pivot point between two fairly minor characters.
That's an interesting point, and it is nice to see that they are giving them, something more to do. I'm sure, as the writer, as the director, when you're putting a project together, you're wanting to make sure these supporting characters do have their interesting moments, so the actor can really latch onto something and you can get more of a name. I think that's probably part of it, but it is nice, and I do like the way that this plays. You got kind of the low camera below both of them, a lot of over the shoulder shots, and it's very effective. And I don't know, there's something very funny when you have Tommy Lee Jones and he's saying things like cow, or he's saying things like, or does it give you the rumbly tummy too? Like, it just, I don't know, it makes me laugh.
Yeah. I don't know, it's very stark and real, because they're insults, but they seem like the kind of insults he would fling at, a allied colonel of the time would fling at a Axis prisoner of war.
You're right, exactly. All right, well, let's wrap this up. We'll come back and talk more about the interrogation, the bulk of it tomorrow. So thank you so much for joining me again, Lorraine.
Thank you for having me.
I certainly appreciate it. Remember, everybody, you can learn more about what we're up to at marvelmovieminute.com. You can find our socials and learn more about membership, all that good stuff. We'll be back tomorrow, so until next time, true believers.
Marvel Movie Minute is a production of True Story FM. Engineering by Andy Nelson. This season's music is Spread the News by Anthony Vega, and this season's show art is by Winston Yabo. Find the show at truestory.fm, and if your podcast app allows ratings and reviews, consider doing that for this show.